Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Native Wellness Institute Power Hour this beautiful Friday. It's so lovely to be with you all today and to be having this important conversation about missing and murdered Indigenous women. And this is a conversation that has been going on all week on the Native Wellness Power Hour. So if you haven't heard the previous episodes, then I really encourage everybody to check them out on YouTube or on nativewellness.com because there have been some really powerful insights happening into this very important subject. My name is Chelsea Luger, and I am a trainer for the Native Wellness Institute. And I'm originally from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and from the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. And I'm currently at home in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live with my husband and my baby girl here, who loves to have her hair in her face and is always attached at my hip. So bear with me if she gets a little bit fussy, but I would love it if Shailene, would you like to introduce yourself next? And then we will get into some questions with our youth leader here.
Cool. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Shailene Joseph. Super excited to be here with these three amazing ladies. Isla's like my best friend. I don't know if she knows it yet. On my mom's side, I'm Ani from Fort Belknap, Montana. And on my dad's side, I'm Koikon Athabaskan from Tanana, Alaska, living out here in Oregon. I'm a trainer also for the Native Wellness Institute and work on the project, the Indigenous 20-somethings project. So been working with them for 3 years strong, and yeah, super excited to be here for this conversation.
Awesome.
Rosalie.
I'm gonna grab a stool here to prop up my computer, but Rosalie, while I do that, I would love it if you could please just introduce yourself as well. Just tell the listeners where you're from, where you're at right now, and anything else that you'd like to share.
Okay. Yeah. Weats Eskechat, Rosalie Fish Sitsta, Bucklechuth Absheth. Hello, my name is Rosalie Fish. I'm from the Cowlitz and Muckleshoot tribes. I live on the Muckleshoot Reservation in Washington, and that's where I am now for quarantine. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a collegiate runner for Iowa Central Community College, and I dedicate my platform as an athlete to advocate for the issues that I care about.
Amazing.
Awesome. Very cool. Can you repeat that? What college you run for again?
It's called Iowa Central Community College.
Iowa Central. Okay. Very cool. Let me see here. Okay. I have some questions here, so I'll be referencing this a little bit. So I just wanted to ask you to start with, Rosalie, what is some of the work that you are doing with the missing and murdered Indigenous women's and girls issue? I know you mentioned that you run as part of that.
Yes, so right now I dedicate my platform as a runner, so I use my races to raise awareness for the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic. I'll do this by having a handprint. I was actually asked to show a picture, so I'll do my best. I only have it on my phone, but like this, for example.
Nice.
So I dedicate my runs and my races to Indigenous women in my community or Indigenous women in the Native communities that have either gone missing or have been affected by violence. And when I ran with the red handprint in order to represent the Indigenous women that have been silenced through violence, who haven't had a voice. And then I'll usually put the MMIW down my leg so people can look it up. And I originally got that idea from Jordan Marie Daniel.
Okay, very cool. And I have a question. I'm curious, when do you have a memory of the first time that you realized that this issue was happening and that you felt that first sense of passion that you wanted to do something about it or to contribute?
Yeah, it would definitely be around 2016. So I was about a freshman and sophomore in high school, right around that area. I had always known for a long time that women went missing, and that I guess funerals for women were normalized to me in my community. And I didn't realize that this was happening to all of the Native women across the nation and even like internationally. I had only thought it was my reservation that this was happening on, and the local reservation. I didn't realize that it was like an epidemic. That's when I really started to feel like a sense of like something needs to be done, not just in my community, but for all of our relatives' communities.
Absolutely. And when you did you start? So you mentioned you were a freshman in high school then, or college? You said
High school.
you were a freshman in high school. So I'm assuming you were a competitive high school runner as well.
I was semi-competitive up until my junior and senior year of high school was when I got to be very competitive.
Okay. And did you start the MMIW activism when you were high school age, or was that when you got to college?
So I started in my high school age, senior in high school. And it was actually after I saw Jordan with the handprint, because while I've been doing other methods like trying to reach out to like tribal nations and writing like my school papers on MMIW, I really didn't feel like I was making an impact. And so when I saw Jordan with the handprint, she made me realize there are other ways that I can use my identity as an athlete to make an impact.
Yes, very powerful.
Hello.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Her dad just got home, so see ya. Okay, well, I mean, I have to say, I find it so inspiring the way that I've seen Jordan's work as well, and I've seen you on social media as well, and I'm a big fan. And I have to say, I find it so inspiring that you, like you said, are using your platform as a runner to spread awareness about this issue, because first of all, it's not easy to talk about. And second of all, when you're putting yourself out there like that with the symbolism and the imagery, I'm guessing you get a lot of questions. Has that been challenging for you to navigate, like getting questions by maybe coaches or teammates or people on opposing teams or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that especially when I first used the handprint up in high school, I was extremely terrified, right? Just knowing that when I stood there in the bathroom and I finally put the paint on me and I just saw like this will catch attention. It is striking on purpose. It is a way that demands that you look at me, that you acknowledge what's happening. And that can be when you're raised in an environment as a young girl, and especially as an Indigenous young girl, you're not really taught to grab attention. And a lot of times, I've been taught to avoid it for my own safety, and now to put myself on that spotlight, it was super terrifying. And I've had an overwhelming amount of support. There are people who don't want to understand and who will do anything possible to construe what's happening to Indigenous women, to place blame and to find scapegoats. And it can be a little frustrating to have to correct people who make assumptions or, like, for example, the first time I used it, everybody told me, "Oh, nice war paint." And that was really frustrating for me because in my community, paint, especially face paint, is used for prayer, right, and for religion. And so when I saw people automatically assuming what my paint meant, it was really frustrating to know and to see the effects that these stereotypes have on all of us.
Yes. And it's interesting too that the sort of stereotypes really are interconnected with the issue in the first place, because people see us as Indigenous women as less than human. They see us as these cartoonish or, whatever stereotype of characters that they have worked up in their mind from Hollywood or from, you know,
Mascots, Halloween costumes.
exactly. So it really is interconnected. And I think that, again, that speaks to the power of your work in, just by being out there as a college runner, as an athlete, you are breaking stereotypes when people see you, even if you weren't to wear the activist paint. And so to have that paint of prayer, in addition to being this powerful Native athlete runner, that's powerful imagery for people to see. And Shailene, feel free to jump in anytime if you also have questions or comments.
Yeah, I actually forgot that we were on live. I was just like, wow, yeah.
Yeah, this is great. And I look back to even, just to share, I asked you your memory of first hearing about this issue. And I remember first hearing about it when I was in college. So this must have been my sophomore or junior year, around 2008, because I graduated in 2010. And I had never, I grew up in North Dakota, and I knew that, of course, that violence against women is prevalent on my reservations. But like you, I did not realize the extent to which, the high rates of sexual assault and sexual violence and murder. I just had no idea. And I remember reading about it in one of my Native law and governance classes. And I was just blown away. And so all of this missing and murdered Indigenous women activism and policy change, I think, has really happened since, like, in the last several years, has really grown a bigger and bigger voice. Mm-hmm. So I know, like, if I put myself in my shoes of when I was in college, and if I had seen a runner like you, I would have been just absolutely blown away. And so, sorry.
We have someone
joining. What's that, Shay?
I said, real quick, we have somebody joining us. Just a moment.
Okay.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
Hi, Jordan.
How are you guys?
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, little sis.
Hi.
Cool. So, Jordan, Rosalie has already talked a little bit about her kind of how she got into the activism that she's doing with her running. And she says that you have been an inspiration and a role model of hers. And so I'm going to ask you if you could just please introduce yourself and just share with us any information that you'd like us to know right off the bat.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Marie Brings, Three White Horses Daniel. I'm Kuichasha Lakota, citizen of Kuichasha Oyate, the Lower Bull Sioux tribe. Currently, I reside on occupied Tonga lands, Los Angeles, California. And for everyone that's on here, I'm a runner. I've been running for 22 years of my life so far. Fourth generation runner, and it's been in the family and something that I'm very passionate about. And more recently, I'm using my running platform to help raise awareness of the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. And on National Day of Awareness for MMIW, I ran 27 miles for a missing and murdered Indigenous woman and helped raise funds for two amazing organizations to support their efforts in ending the violence on our people, as well as the COVID-19 relief support that they're also doing as well. Because 4 of those miles I dedicated to relatives that were taken by COVID-19.
Wow. Powerful work that you're doing, and we see it. And I'm just curious, when did you start your this activism alongside your running, and what gave you the idea of, like, the red hand paint?
Yeah, so running and activism really began when I was asked to organize an event to welcome the Standing Rock Youth who are running over 2,000 miles to Washington, D.C. to oppose DAPL, and running's all I know. So I was like, hopefully they're up for running maybe 2 or 3 more miles after that long journey. So I organized that event with them to really just raise awareness for them and what they're doing and what they were running for, to help get DC to put some pressure on the Army Corps of Engineers. And so for me, running was a way to tell a story, to tell our story, to use our voices. And I have been running for organizations to help raise money for them before, but in terms of like connecting it to an actual elite higher status platform, I had never done that before. And it was until the Boston Marathon last year where I was just at this point of like, enough is enough. The last 2 years, I ran 2 half marathons, and I dedicated my bib number instead of my name. I put MMIW to help raise awareness, hoping that it could spark conversations when I was running or cross the finish line. And luckily it happened, but it wasn't enough, because all I kept seeing was that in our own communities, in our circles, Indigenous circles, we're the only ones really talking about this issue and this epidemic. And so a month later, after that half marathon, I decided to use Boston as a way to share space with our relatives, to give back the best way I knew how, and that's through running. And it was a very last minute decision, because I also didn't want to do something that was going to make me stick out like a sore thumb, because that's just the last thing that I wanted. And so I asked my family, who were coming up to Boston to cheer me on, to bring me red face paint. And no one knew what I was doing until the very moment like I got in the car and was driving to the start line, and my partner was with me. And I started painting the letters on my body, and he helped me with the red handprint. And the red handprint symbolized, that long historical violence that's happening to our Indigenous women and our people. Mm-hmm. And it's also the most prominent image that I have seen in terms of this MMIW movement. And so I really wanted to run in prayer. I wanted to dedicate every single mile to a missing or murdered relative, to raise awareness, and to get on that bus to go to the starting line was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever been in and experienced. I felt so vulnerable and exposed, and my ears were burning because people were talking and staring at me, but like I was focused. I was running for more than myself. I didn't care about running a fast time. I wanted this entire, 3-hour race to be for them, to think about them, to pray for their families, to pray for justice, to pray for healing, to pray for a better and safer future for our communities. And over the duration, it became very heavy and it became very emotional. And that was just the moment that I decided, this is what I'm going to do. I have this platform, I have this access in this world, and the ability to help talk about this issue in a new community that can help elevate this issue. And so that's, after that race, I decided that I'm going to dedicate every single race to our relatives, and keep running for them until I don't have to anymore. And sadly, I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime. I hope it can. But I'm hoping that it can help influence change and bring more people as allies and bring out more voices to speak to this injustice.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have and this is a question for both of you, do you have a memory of a time when you started to realize my voice is making a difference, and maybe a kind of a positive light bulb going off in that sense?
You want to go, Rosalie?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to note with that was, I thought it was very interesting that how you said that this was when you started this work was during Standing Rock, right? And was that around 2016, if I'm
2015, yeah.
Yeah, because that was also when I started to take a little bit of a stance in Indigenous issues in general. I'm not sure if they called the coastal tribes with the canoes for allies, and so I had a few tribes in my area, the Puyallup tribe, that my dad is a part of, and he took the canoe family and hitched the canoes, and we drove from Washington State to South Dakota with the canoes. and that was kind of my first experience of being an advocate, right, or actually taking a physical, personal stance at that pipeline protest, where I wasn't allowed on the front lines because I was pretty young, but just like being there in that community, that was probably one of the first times that I truly connected with the idea of like my Indigenous relatives. Like, we are all relatives, and so I just wanted to kind of point out that, I don't know, that kind of made me happy that, as you were talking about that similarity.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
and Jordan's, that Boston Marathon run that she spoke about was that event was the run that actually reached me personally.
Okay, so you remember seeing pictures of her running?
Yeah, I saw Indian Country Today posted a photo of her with the red handprint and
Oh,
in her uniform.
yep.
And it was just like you said, how you're talking about how it would feel to see a runner now when you were in college. That was exactly what happened to me. It was just super empowering to see, like, there are other ways that I can take a stance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And have either of you seen any other young Native women running with this symbol as well?
Yeah, I've seen some from like the Hardin High School, the cross country team, boys and girls did the same thing, and have seen other high school teams do this. We've seen like Lauren, who plays professional volleyball overseas, she took her platform to do the same thing. And we're starting to see this expand to beyond running, which I think is really awesome and beautiful, especially during this crazy political climate where I feel like we're all trying to find that one way that we can be a voice and give back and hopefully get the change that we want and deserve. So it's really great to see all these new kind of different platforms and niches that people are finding to use their voice.
Absolutely. And I think that it's powerful that as runners, the both of you have connected your passion, your sport, your athleticism with this issue, which is really not something that you see in dominant culture or mainstream culture. Often sports are just sports, and it's for fun or for profession, and you know, it has to be fun, it has to be only that. And so we've seen the backlash that some prominent athletes, Kaepernick of course comes to mind, when they do try to use their platform to stand for something that's meaningful or important to them. And so I think that it speaks to the beauty and the compassion of Indigenous people that, I mean, hopefully the two of you have been more supported than not, you know, by our own people at the very least. And it's just very innovative how you found a way to connect your athleticism with your activism.
Yeah.
And then another thought on Standing Rock, and I remember at that time kind of the heartbreak that a lot of people were feeling when the pipeline did get approved to go through. And after so many people having been there for so many months working so hard. And I remember the question at the time was, you know, what is the teaching from this? What will come of this? There has to be something good coming from this. And so I love to see that, you know, the both of you are an example of some of that energy from the No Dapple movement that has continued on into its own directions and is continuing to work to heal and bring awareness to our communities. And so I love that. I do think that there was a lot of productivity out of that movement, even though the fight was technically, you know, I don't even want to say lost, but it didn't go quite as we would have liked. So it's great to see that this movement segueing also out of that.
I mean, I think our people really gained a lot from that. Just going back to their communities and being voices and being organizers. And I feel like none of us really asked to be advocates and organizers. It's just something that responsibility that we took on and are carrying on. And that's what inspired me to create Rising Hearts. And why I chose that name is because what I saw in Standing Rock, especially when I did go visit, I saw everyone just rising up. rising with their voices and rising with their hearts and their passion and care and love for the land, and for our future generations. And so that's something that really like held like dear to me and to my heart. And that's why I chose that name, is because I saw us as nations coming together despite any kind of, I guess like intertribal or like quarrels that may have been there. A lot of that just got pushed aside. We all came together for one reason, and that was to protect what is most sacred to us, what is important to every single person. And that's what inspired me to do this work that I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. So tell us more about Rising Hearts.
Yeah, Rising Hearts came out of No DAPL. It was right at Occupy inauguration that it got launched and started helping organizing for those efforts, for the Women's March, for Native Nations Rise March, for the People's Climate March, March for Racial Justice. We were there trying to just create platforms and spaces to make sure that Indigenous voices were included in these conversations, in these efforts, because leading up to eviction, I saw that there were so many organizations, especially in DC, that were organizing for Standing Rock, that were organizing on behalf of Indigenous people, but they didn't invite Indigenous people, especially local natives, to speak at those rallies or at those panels. So I started asserting myself into their conversations and in their platforms, introducing myself and be like, hi, how come you haven't invited the Piscataway people here? How come you haven't invited the Tayak family to do a land acknowledgement? Like, you are not really supporting Indigenous people right now. Just because you're speaking about it, you're not including our voices. And so that's what inspired me to create Rising Hearts, was to make sure that when events are being organized and everything, that it has Indigenous representation there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what type of work do you see in the future for Rising Hearts?
Just to continue doing what we're doing, which is just, a lot of it's networking, connecting organizations with voices, making sure that they're hearing from the experts, from Indigenous people to speak to these. So I'm doing a lot of like map making, or finding people to speak at their rallies or on their panels or in these sessions, or at least here in LA, just helping to organize and support, the climate and social justice initiatives that are happening here locally, as well as trying to support national campaigns for climate and social justice and MMIW.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Rosalie, I have a question for you as far as from a young woman's perspective. I know you're still in college age. What do you hear from your friends about this topic and movement? And do you see any involvement from your peers?
I mainly see involvement from other women. So far, actually, in my college, I go to school in rural Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely a culture shock for me, from going to here on the coast, where my culture is just represented everywhere, especially like around Seattle, Swinomish, all of these very prevalent and very connected Native communities. We all know each other very well. We all collaborate on issues together and on events, and have a very visible impact on our environment, even non-Native places. So to transfer to Iowa and to a college where, as far as I've seen, I'm the only Native American from a reservation, and I'm the only one with that type of perspective. It was just really an adjustment, and I've seen a lot of these stereotypes, especially with everybody in that area being like huge Chiefs fans, right? It really changed my perspective on how much work there is to be done. Here, I feel like, well, everybody supports me, right? That's how I feel in this area. And in Seattle, I feel, I just felt very empowered here because my relatives are so close to me. There's so many allies here. And so when I moved, and I saw the stereotypes really start to take, I guess, play a role in what's happening. And so I've had to actually explain to a lot of the teammates that have been bold enough to actually tell me this, which most of the talk about what I do is not to me. Rather, I kind of have to hear about it through, like, backwards pathways, But a lot of the things I've heard is just a lot of assumptions made on stereotypes and refusing to actually listen to the facts. Like I've heard a lot of people and a lot of a few teammates even accuse Indigenous men of the violence happening against Indigenous women, or I've heard that it's Indigenous tribal police letting down these communities, and that's when I have to kind of stand up for not only myself but my the women I'm representing. And there's a lot of people who still don't accept, even on my own team, the idea of the handprint and being an advocate and an athlete, despite them being athletes themselves. And even though I try to explain that we're not just athletes, we're multidimensional. It's been quite a challenge, but I try to use education as my number one way to, I guess, correct what I've seen to adjust to my environment. But yeah, it's definitely been really shocking because I am seeing that things are different there, and it makes me concerned for the Indigenous women in those types of communities who don't have support like I do here.
Yeah. Well, that's so brave of you to keep going. I mean, when you don't have the support of, it's when you don't have the support of even your own teammates. I mean, that's just challenging emotionally, and so it's very brave and commendable of you to be able to continue to do that. And let's see from the next. So I also wanted to ask you both. What are your thoughts on why this is happening? I know there's a lot of data out there about exactly why this is happening, but what comes to mind for you? And also, what can we do to support? I mean, those of us who aren't runners, or maybe some people don't have much of a platform, but how can people best support this issue?
Do you want to go?
So I would say there's a few things that come to mind immediately. And the first is I see the social and political climates that Indigenous communities have been injected into really since like colonial times. I think violence against women was, and especially Indigenous women, um, was like an ideology that was brought in with colonization.
Yeah.
And that it continued throughout boarding schools, and it was something that was never really corrected. And I think it's been happening for generations, and it's never to this day has been addressed and people held accountable like that needs to happen. And then another thing I would say is that Indigenous communities are targeted. A lot of our women are vulnerable, and our children, and even the boys and men, are very vulnerable because we face just higher rates of poverty, right? And we're in very vulnerable situations that make Indigenous people targets. And so that's another reason that I would say that's why this is such an issue. And then the third I would say is obviously the like legislative issues, where if a non-native offender attacks a native person, it's up to the federal government. No matter the crime, no matter how severe the crime, the tribal government doesn't really get a say as to how things are handled. And if the federal government doesn't even record the murders or the attacks, let alone act on it, it leaves Indigenous women and Indigenous peoples extremely vulnerable.
Right. Absolutely. And what do you suggest as far as for folks who are interested in supporting or spreading more awareness of the issue?
A few things I've been saying is the first one is just completing your census, letting the federal government know that like you are here, right? That I am to be counted. Another thing that I've been asking people to do is to reach your Congress people for your state, and if they haven't already, request that they co-sponsor the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2019, because that's a safety net that would benefit not just Indigenous women, but all women. It's like a safety net for women who are vulnerable to violence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much. How about you? Do you have any suggestions on how people can support, or do you want to offer any more information also about the background of the issue?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for VAWA, not only just to reauthorize it, but to call to making it permanent so that we're not going through this political football game of funding it or not with our congressional leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Making it permanent so that our programs and survivors are not always in this limbo at times when it's being discussed in terms of its reauthorization. But I would say colonization really is the culprit is at the root of a lot of problems that we're facing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that conquering mindset of conquering this land that led to conquering our bodies and who we are. And has made our communities vulnerable and exposed and made our communities and our bodies open season, basically, because we have targets on our backs, because our lives are seen as expendable, and that we are largely invisible. And with this epidemic that's happening, you know, as Anita Lucchesio of Sovereign Bodies Institute put it perfectly, as like our relatives are going missing 3 times, once in the data, once in life, and once in the media.
Yeah.
And so that's why this fight feels even harder sometimes. And that's why so many people are speaking out and organizing to help give this issue more visibility. But yeah, I would say just because of colonization and the systems that were created out of that, patriarchal systems and systemic injustice that's happening, really makes us have to fight every single day for our lives and for our existence and for us to be respected and to be seen and to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're working towards, is dismantling this patriarchal system and dismantling white supremacy that puts our communities at risk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So shifting gears just a little bit, we want to talk about self-care, because we know that with any sort of traumatic topics that we deal with in Indian country, it's important that whether we are activists or whether we are just victims of this violence, or whether it just hits close to home for us in any way or another, it's so important that we practice self-care. And many people do that differently. So I'm actually going to first ask Shailene, do you have any, as a trainer for Native Wellness Institute, I know that this is something that you are pretty well versed in. So I'm wondering if you have any self-care that you go through.
Yeah, definitely. I think yesterday our sister Bethany was on, and when we're talking about self-care, when the news of Selena Not Afraid came out, it actually hit social media a lot faster than many other women, and it affected communities so hard. And so one of the first things that I did, for me, I like to express through art, and I don't tend to like share that too often for whatever reason. And so for this piece that I did, I sent it to Beth, and she was like, "Well, what can we do?" It's like 3 a.m, and we're like, "Well, what are the moves that we can make?" And through that, the pain, our sisterhood and our the people that we knew, we reached out, and it was like a crazy time. But like everybody was awake at like 3 a.m. We're like, "This is what we want to do. How can we get into community?" But I think for me, that self-care aspect is like that look at sisterhood, like how we can come together. The beautiful thing I love about this is that through running, they're getting the word out. And then there's other people who are doing it through art or different athletics or going into community. And I love to hear it. I love to see it. And I think for me, it's like the way that it was explained to me at a really young age for self-care is that our bodies and the way that we operate runs like a vehicle in a sense for visual learning, right? we have these 4 pillars or these 4 tires: the spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional, right? And if one of those is flat, okay, and one of them just can't operate, how can we use the other 3 to kind of pump that one up? How can we use those other 3 to lift ourselves up and look inward, to see what are our needs, right? And then, not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's a big one for me. I know I rely on Chelsea a lot. I'll text her and be like, "Yo, this is what I'm going through. Help me." Or our sister Beth or my mom. My mom's an incredible woman who, I look up to, and it's just something to be really aware of, because this issue, it affects so many. And I kept, reminding people, because this is a tough week. Our whole week has been about MMIW awareness, and I keep telling people, take care of yourself, and make sure that you're okay in this time. And if whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, do that. And some days do a little bit extra. And for me, it's been, I've been getting 8 hours of sleep every night, which is not my norm, because I know Chelsea's looking at me like, are you lying? Right? And I've been like hydrating and eating on time. I've been like on it this week. And because I knew I had to be, just to be that extra mindful person, because, we're having youth support groups, and there's these young Indigenous Native women that we've been working with that are like middle school. I think we have one high schooler. And to hear, they were watching the Power Hours, and to hear them talk about what their perspective is and how they want to do this work, like, I was in tears, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like supposed to be the facilitator, and I was like, "Yeah, just give me a second." I was like, "I just y'all." But to watch, young women and everyone on the spectrum, to do this work, it's all inclusive. We need everybody. We need everybody to have a hand in it, and to do the work on themselves so that we can show up ready. The men's panel the other day, I didn't know I needed to hear those things on that day, but I was back here like being the producer, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome." And like 5 minutes in, I was like bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I really needed to hear these things. And so, but also to know that, there are healthy men out there that are doing this work, have good intentions. And so that's our call in as well, is to be mindful. There's space for everybody in this movement. And, it belongs to no one person. It's the people's movement. And for self-care, whatever you love to do a little bit extra, especially on those days where, we're in a pandemic, and I've never been in a pandemic before. So that self-care is like, needed a little bit more some days. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to add.
Awesome. That's so great, Shailene. And Shailene, I'm going to ask you to pass the question on to our next speaker, and I'm going to run and get a charger for my computer because I'm about to power out. So I'll be right back, but please pass the question on to the next.
Rosalie, what have you been doing for self-care?
So me, I really, like you said, I just kind of increased the things that I'm already doing. The one reason why I think, and maybe Jordan can relate to this too, is choosing running to advocate for this issue is something that is really powerful, because not only are we getting to raise awareness, but running is something I use to heal myself, especially when I was having some mental health challenges when I was younger. And so now it feels like, for some families, it feels like I'm getting the opportunity to help them heal as well when I dedicate those runs. So I run a lot when I'm having a bad day, and when it gets really, really bad. Sometimes I just cry it out. I've been trying to teach my brother how to do this too. He's 10, and he's very emotional. He's very sensitive, and he cries. We cry together. We cry all the time, and it's just something that we do to allow ourselves to feel vulnerable. And then I take a shower, I wash it all off, and I'm ready to restart, to just kind of that like hard reset, where I've gotten everything out, I've expressed everything, I've acknowledged what's happening, I've acknowledged the pain that I'm going to feel, but I've also acknowledged that even though I might not to really get to wash it away, I can restart and I can, I can find some way to contribute. I can, I guess, just maybe not wash it off, but I can, I would say, change the way that I'm looking at things. So, and then another thing I think that not everybody has the opportunity to, but I use, my family uses sage just to kind of cleanse like our areas and to just kind of like calm our spirits sometimes. And so I'll do like sage or nettle tea, just my ways that I can connect myself to the earth and to my culture and remind myself who I am, who's worked for me, who's put in this work for me to be here and to have these opportunities. And even though things are really sad and really dark sometimes, to look at where we were before, right? Where were we 10 years ago and where are we now?
Mm, very good. I love that. I love that you mentioned that expression of emotion, you and your brother crying together, and what a healthy teaching for him to have as a young man as well, because there's nothing wrong with crying, when we need to, and it's okay to let our emotions out. I think a lot of us feel like we have to be tough all the time because sometimes it is tough on the res or, in the activism world or whatever it may be, but it's good to cry. Um, and Jordan, I want to pass that question on to you as well. I know that there's a dichotomy of activism. In that one sense, it's very empowering for oneself and for others, but in another sense, I would imagine it can be very stressful or heartbreaking at times to sort of constantly be carrying this issue. So I'm very curious about how you do your self-care.
So my self-care and healing journey is very it's in progress. I'm trying to figure out ways to how to do this running and advocacy in a healthy way, because just in 2019, 106 miles, 106 prayers dedicated, it took a toll on my spirit, my emotional, my mental, and my physical. That was the first time that it motivated me to seek therapy. And luckily, I'm really grateful to have like an Indigenous therapist who understands what's happening in our communities, because it's a lot easier to talk about it and get a better understanding. But, I learned of compassion fatigue, and that's what I was really suffering from. And then I had adrenal fatigue because I felt like if I wasn't running every single day and really pushing myself to perform the best, not only just as an individual, but perform the best for our relatives, I felt like I was letting this platform or them and this movement down. And so I ran my body into the ground, and I'm like going on a year of this injury that I'm trying to like heal from in my heel. And I had anxiety attacks. I had insomnia. I had depression for almost all of 2019. And I've had to reevaluate my life and how I can give back to continue running in a good and healthy way. And so that starts with, trying to get back into therapy, trying to limit the music, the shows, podcasts that I listen to that have violence in it, because that was triggering me and I would get anxiety attacks. Having to monitor kind of the certain things that I would see on social media, and kind of just hide it. And I feel bad because I don't want to ignore it, but at the same time, it's triggering to me, and I feel like it pulls me back from trying to heal. And so that's what healing is for me right now. It's a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure it out, how to do this in a good way without trying to run my body into the ground, and being able to be strong to continue doing this for however long that I can. And so luckily, next week I have my therapy session again after a few months, because I've neglected it, because I put work first. I put organizing first. And I've always had this mentality of like, I'll take care of me later. there's always time for me later. It's about being with our people and giving back and doing this for the good of our people. So I'm definitely learning how to put myself first, and it's really weird and it's awkward and I don't like it, but I'm learning to cope with it a lot better. But yeah, a lot of saging, sweetgrass, cedar. I'm getting back into drawing and bringing out the sewing machine, trying to find things that can focus my attention so I can be present in that one thing and kind of disconnect from everything else around me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Man, there have been so many great tips shared between the three of you on this could be like a whole self-care workshop in and of itself. And it's so powerful also to hear you are not afraid to express your vulnerabilities. You're not afraid, and our youth really are listening. And everyone from youth to elders even can you know, can benefit from hearing that it's okay to seek therapy. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to cry. You know, we can see the three of you strong women are doing that. And so that's really a powerful message and an important one, particularly for our youth to hear. So thank you both. Thank you, the three of you, so much for being strong and vulnerable and sharing that. And that leads me kind of a segue into our next question. We have 7 minutes left, so I think we should be able to cover it, which is, do you have a message that you would like to leave with other young women, whether it's directly related to MMIWG or if it's about anything else in life? I mean, you're just such role models. So I'd love to start with you, Rosalie, if you have a message for other young women who might be listening.
Yeah, I would say that my one message to especially Indigenous youth is to never underestimate yourself, and to know that you are powerful and you are impactful, even if you might not think you are. This is something I've had to learn throughout, my experience as an advocate. Is I started off my freshman year of high school as recovering from a suicide attempt. And I really didn't, at 14 years old, I didn't think that my life would result to anything or that I would really make an impact on anybody. And now to know that I'm 19 years old, 5 years later, and I'm actually being able to take a physical stand on issues that impact my family, the issues that target the 3 Indigenous women in my immediate family. I would say that I wish that I had never underestimated myself, and it's so share your stories, because I personally I make a huge effort to share my story and where I've been, because I know that in reality a lot of us are very similar. We face the same or similar traumas, the same types of frustrations, or long-standing types of depression. And I would say to never underestimate yourself. Know that you are powerful and that you do have an opportunity and a platform to make an impact.
Very good. Shailene, I'll ask you to go next and just share. We only have a few minutes here left, but just if you could share any advice for young women who are concerned with this issue or who just might be listening today.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think it's as simple as you are worthy.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have, on whatever scale that we see ourselves, you're worthy of good things and you deserve good things. And, if it's, if there's a fear of crying, kind of get those things out of the way. Having a trauma-informed lens means that sometimes we're brought up in ways that, to learn not to talk, trust, or feel. And, when we can kind of navigate through that and learn to talk, trust, and feel, things change. And to know that you have support. I always say it time and time again, if you need anything, to reach out. And if you need someone to lean on, that I can be that person as well. And I know I have a big support network that is here as well too. So
talk, trust, and feel. That's really important. Thank you, Shailene. And Jordan, I would love to hear from you also. Any message to young women out there?
Yeah, I would say just believe in yourself. You are resilient, and we're all here because of our ancestors, and we're that success moving forward into the next generations. And when using your voice, believe in what you're passionate about and what you feel, because when you speak it, you're speaking truth to power and you're putting it out in the universe, and it's going to create a ripple effect of influence and impact for the next person and our next generations. And specifically in this movement, I know so many of us are impacted by MMIW. I know Rosalie has lost a loved one. I have lost a loved one. We all are impacted either directly or indirectly because we know someone who lost someone. And so we're all motivated by using our voice in whatever platform we have to, create a better and safer future. And so I would just say, believe in yourself, that you are resilient and you are meant to be here.
I love that you say speak truth to power, and you both are running to power, which is amazing and powerful, and it inspires me. It inspires Shailene. We're all just in awe of the work that you do, and not just the physical, but the spiritual, the mental, the emotional effort that you're putting into this day in and day out. And my prayer for you is that you really do continue on that self-care journey, and that, that you both continue to thrive in everything that you do. So we're just going to go ahead and wrap it up here. But just really quick, in the last 2 minutes, is there anything that we missed, or any final words that you'd like to share?
I just want to say I'm inspired by both of you. Like, you guys are doing such incredible work. And Shailene, I'm so inspired at your ability to tell or describe what you feel and what you want in the art that you've created. And for you, Chelsea, like, I'm inspired you just because of like fitness and wellness and what that means to us as Indigenous people, and connecting it back to our roots. So like, I've been following you and watching your work and what you do for so long, I feel like. And so seeing that Indigenous representation in the health and wellness world is what has inspired me. So I just want to give thanks to both of you for the work that you're doing, because you guys are inspiring so many and creating that change that we need.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really do. Rosalie, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, just for you three, I would kind of like to extend on that and say that you three women are, I'm a little bit younger than you guys, and you three women are the demographic that have made it possible for me to thrive, in my own way. You guys have been leading the way, and it's given me the opportunity to try and make an impact and to voice my opinions, and just know that you are definitely role models, and your existence has made it possible for me to be here, and just that that's my goal now, is to do the same thing that you guys are doing, so that I can eventually, hopefully, make it possible for other Indigenous future athletes and advocates to exist and have this platform as well.
Yes, and you will. You absolutely will do that.
Medicine.
Oh, I feel so good. That was such a great conversation. Thank you all so much. Oh man, that just like sent me off into the weekend in a good way. And so we'll close it off here. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks the three of you for everything that you do.
All right. Thanks for everyone that tuned in. Thank you so much for watching and supporting.
Yes.
Oh, is that Aloe?
Yeah. Bye everyone.